The queen tells fate that her sole task now is to stay alive, not just for herself but for the kingdom and her partner, Prince August. Welcome to the Alpha's Loved channel. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. Chapter 23, in which embers for my ashes became steel. How many lives do you think have been saved by Bane? The king stared into the low embers of the fire as Gavin and the queen sat, thinking their own thoughts and trapped in their own world. The sudden question from the king, however, shook both of them from their contemplation. "Sir," Gavin said, sitting up more in his chair and addressing his king. "I'll say this only one time more, Gavin. How many lives do you think have been saved by Bane?" Gavin and the queen exchanged glances. The eye of the storm had passed. The tornado was touching ground. "There is not a definite answer, sir, but you yourself know that it saved a whole region of the kingdom that alone is above 10,000 lives." The king kept his back to his counsel as he watched the dying embers burn out. "She made it." The silence penetrated the air, leaving in its wake a sudden thick tension that left a weight on their chest. "My king," Gavin started. However, the king interrupted him before he could finish. He turned around and started waving his hand in the air, describing an idea that had been forming since the information had been presented to his ears. "She made Bane, her fragile girl." A deep sigh issued from the king as he closed his eyes and started to rub his temples. "Do you know how long I have tried to keep this kingdom together? Know how long I have faced the tension in the packs with useless women who cannot follow the simple task of either staying alive or being in the right bed?" He opened his eyes to stare at the queen and Gavin as they wordlessly looked up at him. The king's voice barely came out as a whisper as he slowly drew nearer to them with each word spoken. "I have bleed, sweat, cried, cursed and done God knows what to elevate myself above the throne in this." The king starts laughing. "This is what I find out. That all my effort will be taken away by a boy who has too much power and can barely string together a sentence. Was he a threat? No, him I can handle. But this her?" The laughter continued to issue from the king as the queen and Gavin watched in silence. "She is the one who will ruin me. She is the one who gives him a voice. She completes him. When he she can. When he can't please the people, she can. And who do you think is there to back her up if anyone chooses to disagree with her? Sweet, pretty face." The king bent down eye level with Gavin and the queen. The silence stayed suspended as no one answered the question. "Ham." The king shouted in their faces. "This could be good for the kingdom." The queen began, but the rising laughter in the king rose and interrupted her speech. "They are not good for the kingdom. I am what's good for the kingdom. They may not like me." "So what? So what if they don't like me? They have no idea what I do for them. Behind closed doors, under their blind minuscule lives, that's when it really happens. I deal with the demons that come out at night. I take care of their worst nightmares so they can go on living their little fantasy of house. They have no idea. The packs, the whole lot is ungrateful for what I do. For the sacrifices I have made." By the end, the king's breathing was uneven. He stumbled a few steps before sitting down. The queen and Gavin leaned forward towards him. The queen reached across the space and rested her hand on the king's shoulder. He very quickly shoved it off. "No, they don't understand. They don't know what you do. Not even August knows how much you do. What darkness you enter to keep this kingdom safe. But he will have to learn it soon. Eventually, the time will come for him to take his place. God forbid the day when that happens." The king sighed under his breath. Gavin got up and took the spot of pacing for the king. "We can make time. We can get more space for the two. Send Fate to the academy. Let her stay there for a while. And in the meantime, let Prince August learn from you about the kingdom. Let him learn about the darkness that seeps inside. ease him into the corruption, into the world that he will soon have to live in. He winced at the thought of separating to life mates. The king stared at the ceiling with thoughtful eyes. He was not born to rule. The silence stayed in the room. The queen shuffled in her chair as Gavin stared at the last glowing light from the wood in the fire. No one disagreed. Now here's her, Gavin said, turning around to face the group. Yet his greatest weakness. He would set fire to the world around him and never let a single flame touch her, the queen softly said. The king got up and stood next to Gavin as they both turned to stare at the fire pit. It's funny, isn't it? The king said, giving a small chuckle. No one expects the angel to be the one to set the world on fire, though. Gavin stared at the now dead fire pit as he slowly shook his head. What do you plan to do? He asked as he turned to his king. The harsh smile that held its place on his face sent shivers down both him and the queen's back as they warily watched. I might have a plan. Chapter 24, in which messages are hidden. How to kill a king. It's simple. First, find a queen, make her strong, make her smart, make her fierce, make her beautiful, make her kind. Add lust and simmer, then scrape away all the love, serve warm and wrapped in silk now. Watch him chokes. E25. Fayette traced her hand across the wood and designs that were carved into the table. Her fingers ran over the different curves and textures of the wood, traced the hidden crevices and lines, and found and created the shape and meaning of the fixture without her eyes. The intricately chiseled walls ran around the legs, chasing an unknown object as different crescent moons popped in out of the sides. And as her hand traced, even more, Fayette found that the carvings went further beneath the table, to a place where the eye could not visibly see them if they were to just glance at the magnificent desk. The queen had put no time frame as to when she would be back, so Fayette could only assume she still had another several more minutes to wait. Trying to make as little noise as possible, she got down on her knees and crawled under, squinting her eyes to try and make out what was carved in a place that was not easily accessible. If someone were writing her life story, this, to my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm, would be that opportune cliché moment for the queen to walk in and find her. However, the queen did not walk in, and Fayette was able to look and see nothing but two wolves staring at each other. One appeared to be crying, while the other looked up at a full moon with closed eyes. By the time the queen came back through the door she had left, Fayette was safely secured in her chair, sitting as if she had never left it in the first place. A man railed in behind the queen. His presence took up enormous space in the room, and yet at the same time, he seemed to be able to hide and blend in behind the queen as she took a chair opposite from Fayette. Thank you for waiting, Fayette, the queen said as she settled in her chair and moved it forward. Fayette smiled and nodded, but chose to remain silent. This is Eldon. The queen raised her hand to point out the man behind her. Fayette, as you know, and as I'm sure Prince August has told you in one of your dinners together, you are in a very vulnerable position right now. Fayette clasped her hands in her lap to keep from snapping them. She let the queen continue uninterrupted. Life mates are rare to find, but when you find them, they are a great asset to each other. In this special case, however, there is not much you can really do for Prince August. The queen laughed and rolled her eyes. He's a prince. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He is everything already. A squeezing sensation gripped Fayette's heart. She had never heard the queen talk like this in such a blunt, brutal manner, but all her words were truth to Fayette's chaotic mind. There is only one thing we need you to do. The queen leaned forward, as the air in the room suddenly grew serious. By we, I do not mean me. I do not mean Prince August. I do not even mean you. I mean the kingdom. There is one. And only one thing you need to do now. Only one duty you have. The queen inhaled after her rushed words left her out of breath, and audibly swallowed. Stay alive. Fayette's whole body froze. Her back stiffened, and she stared at the queen with eyes that were starting to realize the depth of her words. If you do not complete this task, then you will have failed your kingdom and Prince August when it is his time to reign. Flashbacks were forming in Fayette's mind of her own nightmarish dream. Of what happens when a life mate passes, how the other seem to lose their sanity. They will come for you, Fayette, the queen whispered. Fayette's head jerked up to look at the queen. She was staring hard at Fayette, willing her to grasp the hidden meaning of her words. You are the strength, but you are also the weakness. They know this. They will come for you. What do I do? Fayette whispered. She knew something was wrong with the queen. She couldn't understand it. But she knew something was off. She knew by the queen's actions and by the way she was staring intently at Fayette that she wanted her to realize something. Fight. Learn to fight. You have Eldon. He is one of your bodyguards. You can't trust him. The queen nodded slowly at her last sentence. Fayette's mind was whirling. Something was wrong. She just couldn't understand what. Learn to shift. Learn to protect yourself. Use your mind. Use it, and make sure the same mistakes of past generations are not repeated. The queen then abruptly stood up. It's time for your first training lesson with Prince Alto Gavin, she said brightly, her attitude taking a complete turn. The queen walked out the door, leaving a stunned Fayette still sitting in her chair. Eldon moved slowly out of his corner towards her. When he reached the petrified girl, he extended his hand in an offering gesture. Taking it, Fayette was slowly helped up and escorted out of the room, following the queen and thinking furiously over the words that were spoken. Chapter 25, in which I trained darkness does not always equate to evil, just as light does not always bring good. Cist, I couldn't figure out why Eldon was there. The queen had assigned him to me, but didn't I already have Lizzie as a bodyguard? And what was with her behavior? Not once did she call me dear. I noted quickly in my head. Something was off, like she was holding herself back. I knew the danger, though, that the queen had warned me of. How I knew of the danger. It was all too real to my mind of the crippling cycle that seemed to be trapped within life mates. What do you do when you lose a piece of your soul? That's the question that is asked of when a life mate loses their loved one. It's crippling enough just to lose someone you love. But through the bond of life mate, you literally form an attachment to them. Your souls merge together. Such a violent tear can only result in the want of your erasement. Because you know that your life will never be whole again. All these thoughts filtered through my mind as I followed Eldon to the training grounds. I had read countless books on life mates because of my father's actions. Back when I was looking for a solution, a cure, anything to help him. Now the thought scared and amazed me at the same time. I had a life mate. I could suffer the same fate as my father. Be the son, I chanted my motto to myself. These were too heavier thoughts to think so early in the morning. I couldn't think of the future and what could be. I could only think of the now. The present. Rounding the last corner, I saw a sight that made me smile. Lizzie was bouncing around, doing her warm-ups, all the while asking a nervous Gavin and a glaring Alto questions. Do we really need shirts for this, guys? I mean, I say we split up and form teams. You be Skins and Fayette and the new hunk she brought, and I will be Shirts. Her thoughts were met with silence. Hey, not everyone rushed to take their shirt off, laughing at herself. Her eyes lit up when they saw me. Fayette, she squealed, rushing towards me. Hey, Lizzie. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylin Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Laughing at how bright and amazing she was, ready to kick some wolf booty. She questioned, her fangs slightly showing in her grin. Gavin saw and stepped forward. You can partially shift. He questioned, his eyes holding astonishment. I was a pack warrior once, Lizzie said proud. One of the best. I know how to fully and partially shift. My little baby girl over here though. Lizzie motioned towards me. Only knows basic fighting skin skills. Gavin still looked at Lizzie with surprised eyes. I loved watching people react this way when they realized that Lizzie was an expert warrior. But how? Gavin sputtered before Alto interrupted him. Enough, Gavin. She can partially shift. Good for her. Lizzie glared at Alto but chose not to speak out to gap against the wave of power that radiated from him. Alto took a step towards Eldon, and to my surprise shook his hand. Eldon, showing what looked like a small smile. August, the man who was next to me said, you know each other. I couldn't help but ask the question. I could have sworn Eldon was bad news by the way the Queen was acting. Alto nodded. Eldon will be my future beta when I am crowned. I couldn't stop the gasp that escaped me. This guy. I looked up at Eldon, who looked down at me with laughter in his eyes. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Now the Queen was really confusing me. But if Alto knew and trusted him, then I felt slightly more comfortable in his presence. Enough distractions, Alto said suddenly. Power radiated from him in that moment, making Eldon, Lizzie, and Gavin bow their head involuntarily in submission. My eyes widened at the strength that seemed to come out of Alto. I wanted to move closer to him. I wanted to feel more of it. It made me feel safe. He eyed me with a small smirk on his face. Pleased in some way that I did not react like how the others did. The training was already starting. Lizzie demonstrated to them the moves I knew. Alto was careful with me, probably too careful. He growled whenever Gavin or Anne tried to help or touch me in any way, even if it was just to steady me or prevent me from falling. I eyed him closely after a while, becoming annoyed with his behavior. Gavin told me in a side whisper, when no one was listening or looking, that it was because his wolf that was inside him was so powerful. And the fact that we were life mates. Though Alto was careful with me, he was still ruthless. After hours of working, I felt like my arms and legs could do no more. I didn't want to complain or say anything to Alto, but it was obvious that I was the only one who was feeling the exhaustion. No one else in the group was even breathing hard. The day came to an end. I fell down on the ground, spreading myself out, breathing hard. You'll get cramps if you do that, Alto said, his dark eyes watching me. I can tee. Breath. I managed to huff out. What idiot had told me to run a mile as a warm down? Right, the one that was staring at me, making my skin spark and heart go even faster. He leaned down and sat on the ground next to me. Alto continued his chant on breathing until I finally had it steady. Good, he said in a low voice. I can't believe you do that every day. I groaned. I had worked a lot as an Omega, so I was good the first few hours. But then hours fell into half a day. And half a day fell into a whole day. Alto looked down at me with amusement in his eyes. We'll be doing the same thing again every day this week. NNNUOO. I slowly moaned out. I thought you wanted me to live. Eldon laughed in the distance at my comment. Alto just knitted his eyebrows in confusion before helping me up. Come on, he whispered in my ear, making goosebumps appear on my arm. Let's go eat in our garden. I grinned a silly smile at him, lost in a cloud of bliss so easily at his promising words. But first, Alto backed away from me, wrinkling his nose. Maybe you should take a shower. I gasped out loud, staring in outrage at his comment while he laughed at my face. "Oh no, he didn't, sister," Lizzie said, in the background. I turned around. "Fine, I'll take a shower. And then I'll meet you." I raised my head in the air, not looking back at my supposedly life mate. Lizzie slung her arm over my shoulder, walking back to the room with me. "Let's get out of here, Fayette," she said loudly. "All these guys stink." Chapter 26, in which it darkens. Tell me something you are afraid of. Oblivion. Crowded rooms and authority figures and being alone too long. You. I'm terrified of you because you have the power to destroy me and you don't even know it. You have no idea. I'm less afraid of dying than I am of losing you, and that scares me too. I'm not afraid of anything, dear. Everyone is afraid of something. Things I wish you'd never asked, JPH. The crash broke me from my slumber. Or at least I think it did. I just felt a jolt go through my body. As if I had been walking down the stairs and missed a step. Crash. The noise finally registered to me, and I swiftly got up from the couch. Running into the kitchen, I found my father sitting on the floor. Small cuts and drops of blood forming on his hands as he picked up the pieces of glass. Oops. I watched as some shards of glass entered into his flesh, but he never showed any pain. "Daddy made a mess," Father said. "Stay away, Fayette. I don't want you to hurt yourself. Don't touch anything. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." I nodded, slowly backing away from the kitchen to watch from the safety of the doorway. "Can you go get Daddy a broom, Fayette?" I raced to the little closet in the hall to do what Father had asked me. Coming back, I silently handed him the broom and dustpan. He quickly swept the small shards up and wiped the floor down with a wet rag. "Coast is all clear now. You can come in, Fayette," Father said. I approached slowly, looking at the ground to make sure it really was safe. I stopped in front of Father, looking up at his tall frame. He bent down, coming eye level with me. It was probably the first time he had really looked me in the eyes since. "You look so much like her." He reached a hand out, softly stroking one of my cheeks. I flinched as I felt the wet blood make contact with my skin. I dared not say anything. "So much," he said again as he continued to stroke my cheek, over and over and over and over. Our eyes stood where he looked into my eyes, a sky of blue looking into the meadow of the green. Blue and green and swirls and fangs and blood, I jolted awake. I laid there with wide eyes, looking up at the ceiling. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." No, it was a memory. A memory from a time in my past. I continued staring into the silence as I slowed my breathing down, collecting my thoughts. My eyes were still wide from the tortured past my mind had led me through. A memory. I started when the sound of my alarm went off. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." I slowly rose and turned the noise off. The silence hung in the air once more. I ran my hands through my hair, trying desperately to get my bearings. Breathe. Just breathe. Be the sun. I lifted myself off the bed and mechanically went through the routine that I had developed now. We were training today. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." We were training all days, but it didn't matter to the athletes. I felt some feeling go back into my body as I registered how much I hated working out. I thought of the only good side to it, seeing Alto. I clung to that thought and the feeling of his hands on my body as he helped me train. The door opened then, as Lizzie and Jane walked through. "Morning sunshine," Lizzie sang at the top of her voice. "Morning, you two. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Jane walked closer with a frown on her face, Fayette, are you okay? A small bubble of panic arose in me. Did she know? Why do you ask? I said in a strained voice. You just look really pale, and you're sweating a little. Jane came closer to me and placed a hand on my forehead. I can't really tell, but you seem warm. A WWE relaxed Jane. She's just trying to fake it out so she doesn't have to train. I threw a glare at Lizzie before turning to Jane. I feel fine, Jane. Thanks for worrying, though. A small wrinkle formed on Jane's forehead. A sure sign that she disapproved, but she didn't say anything else. Lizzie jumped forward, putting her arm around my shoulder. So tough, girl. You survived almost 2 weeks of torture. What's another month or 2 more? I groaned out loud as Lizzie dragged me out of the room, Jane waving a small farewell, her worry still evident on her face. These past 2 weeks had been torture. At one point I felt small resentment towards Alto, thinking, why do I have to train? Why do I have to change myself for someone? But he quickly felt my anger through our growing bond and shut those feelings down. I gave a heavy sigh as I remembered his motivational speech saying, it's for your health and protection, and your future position. Though those words did not comfort me, they did drive home the point he was trying to make. I had said in front of a lot of people, and the king and queen, that I could be a queen myself someday. Whining and groaning about doing push-ups and running seemed the least of my worries, and would look very bad if I gave up because I couldn't handle it. But man, did I hate working out. We entered the training grounds. They were already there, of course. They were hard at work training well before I started. Alto and Eldon stopped in their sparring session. It didn't look too serious. I think they were actually warming down. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfading patience, enthusiasm, Eldon said, nodding his head towards us. Alto moved silently towards me until he was towering above me. He leaned down, his hand coming up to stroke my arm, almost involuntary. Over the past few weeks, I had noticed a few things shift within the bond. I felt some emotions trickle from Alto. Those were very few, and it had only really happened twice when he felt a strong emotion. But he was starting to feel what I was feeling also. And then there is a pull. I just need to be next to him. When he's around, I need to touch him. The smallest touch. Just a hand on the waist, a shoulder brushing each other, fingers barely touching. But it soothed my heart and made an ache within my chest disappear when he and I were breathing in the same space. Morning, Alto, I whispered. His eyes grew, if possible, even darker. I fell into the void until his words brought me back. Are you okay? What? I quickly took a step back from him, startled by his question. A flash of gold showed in his eyes. In that same instant, I registered a similar flash of pain in me. I had hurt him by stepping back. He stepped closer to me, though, still waiting for my answer. Yes, I'm okay. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Was I still pale? Alto narrowed his eyes at me as if trying to find something within my words. He nodded, though, and shifted his body so that he half-faced me. Let's start then. I barely repressed the groan from my mouth. Alto seemed to take on another attitude when raining. Lizzie and I quickly realized it when we had tried to joke around once. That never happened again. Lizzie sobered up at his words. I could see hints of her past life showing in her as the days went by. She had been training every day with us, and I was just beginning to grasp how great of a warrior she formerly was. Alto, though, Alto was something else. When I watched Alto train and fight, I sent a silent prayer to his opponents. Good luck. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I had not seen him shift yet. I shuddered at the day when I would watch him strip down and transform. I didn't know if I was scared or excited. Lizzie claimed excitement. The training had its routine now of warm-ups and different exercises. Alto believed in training not only the body but the mind, as per the warrior's code. Lizzie was familiar with the silent meditations that we did for an hour every midday. It had taken me a while to grasp it. Okay, I still didn't have it. Ella always fell asleep and was woken up by a laughing Eldon and disapproving Alto. And then the day ended with dinner. Alto and I eating dinner. We had our garden, our secret hideaway where I alone saw him, unwinged and talk to me. He still didn't talk much, but I loved the thoughts he had and input he shared. He was nice to talk to. I tried hard whenever I was around look at his lips. Don't stare, don't stare, don't stare. But I felt his lingering gaze there also. It was only a matter of time. Lizzie always laughed at the fact that so much time had already gone by and yet Alto had not done anything. Not even a peck. I didn't know if it relieved me or made me sad. I had never kissed anyone before. These thoughts always came to my mind as I watched him talk. I wonder if they are soft. I wonder how they feel. I wonder. I wonder. I wonder. I stared hard at his lips as they talked to me now. However, no sound was coming out of them. I stared even harder, trying to make out the words he was saying. A ringing in my ears though seemed to drown them out. Suddenly the lips that I had been staring so hard at seemed to blur and grey around me. What? I felt dirt under my skin and in my hands. Was I on the ground? I shuddered in trapped confusion as my vision continued to grey. Alto's words registering as if they had gone through a tunnel and only now the echo was reaching me as he whispered in a scared voice. Fayette. Thea. Fuata Ringer. Chapter 27 in which it happens she's water. Powerful enough to drown you, soft enough to cleanse you, and deep enough to save you, Adrian Michael. Static. I felt like an old television set that was desperately trying to pick up a signal. My eyes were open, but all I saw was grey. I heard no noise. Nothing, except the static background. Panic seeped into me as I laid there. I felt nothing. My skin contacted nothing. I was trapped in my silent void, unable to register where I was. I don't know how much time passed before my vision cleared out. The grey static soon fuzzed it away. I felt lighter, my body exhausted on its own from the experience it had just gone through. Soon I could register the texture under my skin and the feel of cloth. The static hum in my ears faded as voices replaced it. Angry voice. What's wrong? What's happening? Get the antidote. Thea. That one whispered word of pain caught my attention above the other shouts. I tried desperately to fight against the grey static that clung to my vision, but the more I fought, the harder it became. She's seizing. Hold her. I felt warm. Solid hands pressed me down. I would those hands anywhere. I fought through the haze, trying to reach him, but the static was too thick. I wanted him to know I was still there. I wanted to ask him what was going on. But the static consumed me. I woke to the steady beeping noise. I felt an uncomfortable air push its way into my nose. I raised my hand, pulling the source of it away. Fate, stop. That voice. I opened my eyes, closing them again when they met the lights. I felt the instrument on my nose be readjusted, and the uncomfortable air continued to force its way into me. I flickered my eyes open, squinting them. He sat next to me. I raised my hand, and he caught it, capturing it in his own. He exhaled as our skin made contact. I got the bearings of the surrounding room, my bedroom. I pushed my way up. He got up and helped me, lifting me into a sitting position. WHA, I stopped short and winced at the ragged pull from my throat. Alto turned and poured a glass of water for me. I greedily drank from it, finishing half of the glass before handing it back to him. What happened, Alto? I questioned. He looked at me with shattered eyes, His eye bowed as he took his hand and claimed mine again. You were poisoned. Silence hung in the air as I processed the information. But, poison. My eyes widened at the news. The doctor said it was a slow agent, making its way to your system fully before striking. What poison? I whispered. Not that I would know any of the names, but it all seemed surreal that someone would want to poison me. Aggravated, Alto said. I nodded at the word I had never heard of before. Alto reached up and stroked my face. He shivered before pulling it back. I saw a glimpse of something I had not seen in a long time. Something I had never hoped to see in Alto. Desperation. How serious was it? I needed to know all of the facts. It was not meant to. Alto faltered at the unspoken word, his hand clenching mine tightly. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I questioned. He inhaled a sharp breath of air between clenched teeth as he nodded. So what was it supposed to do? I questioned, thinking of the purpose for the attack. To get to me, Alto said. I looked at his shaking hands and broken eyes. Something in me clicked in irritation at the fact that these actions had somehow done their intended job. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I reached out to hold his face in my palm. He surprisingly let it rest there, even leaning in a little. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I'm alive. I'm breathing. You saved me. Alto's hands clenched mine harder. I could see his knuckles whiten. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. They what? If it had been, what would I? I watched with sad eyes as Alto struggled to contain his grief and words. I reflected back to my father and his actions of my mother's death. The Queen's voice rose within my head. They will come for you, Fayette. Had she somehow known? My mind boggled down with the weight of thinking the Queen could be behind this. This was bigger than I thought. Why could it never be a simple story of a boy and girl falling in love now? I watched as Alto looked like he would fall apart any second. I could not let history repeat itself. What if the roles had been reversed though? I accused myself silently. Would you be acting calm and composed if Alto had been poisoned? No. That was the hard truth. I would break down. But I needed to know that I would rise. Not fall and stay broken. As harsh as the truth may seem, I didn't want to become my father and mother's love story. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He looked up at me. His face was twisted in tight control as he tried to rein in his grief. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I said again, tasting his name on my lips. What would you do if I died? Alto choked on whatever he was holding back. Fayette, don't speak anymore. The command in his tone made me realize that he was used to being listened to. But his words had no sway over me. No, Alto, answer me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Struggling as I sat up straighter. What would you do if I died? The silence in the air was filled with a soul, crushing growl. My toes curled up at the noise. It was frightening, but a fire of determination had been lit under me. I knew I needed to do this. I watched him, waiting for his response. I would hunt them down, whoever did it. I would kill them slowly and make them scream, make them feel so much pain that they die from it. Then I would join you. I balked at the answer. What if no one killed me? I questioned. He glared at me. I knew then that he didn't like confrontation. He didn't like answering the hard questions and was not used to someone having the guts to force him to answer them. What if I died of old age? Or if I tripped down the stairs? My own fault. Would you destroy the stairs? Then kill yourself. He continued to glare at me. This is pointless, Fayette. Like you said, you're alive now, no? I shocked both of us with my sudden outburst. You don't understand, Alto. I've seen what the mating ban does to souls. I've seen firsthand the effect it has. I watched as slow realization crept into his eyes. He had probably shoved that to the back of his mind after hearing of it. What will you do? I asked again. He inched closer to me and stared down at our entwined hands. Fayette. His voice sounded strained. I was pushing him into new places and forcing him to his limit. I could tell. But something inside me just told me that I needed to do this. I don't know. I smiled at his honest answer. What would you do? He reflected the question back to me. I thought before saying, I would break. I would probably never be the same. But I would tape myself together. And what if we have children? I would want to be there for them. I wouldn't want them to lose to parents. Alto's eyes widened at my admission. Who was I kidding though? In this moment I was brave. Even after seeing the heartbreak, I claimed that I would be able to walk from it. But the memory of my father, and his actions towards me after Mother's death will forever haunt me. I realized then that I lost to parents that sad morning when I woke up to my father's mournful howls. Alto looks at me, with a slight twitch to his lips. I blush and look down. Well, we are getting married. I mean, it's just a thought. I mumbled, but my ramblings were interrupted by Alto moving closer. His breath from my face as his eyes searched into my own. Very carefully he removed the object from my face that had been spitting little bursts of air into my nose. Slowly, so as not to startle me, he leaned in closer. I moved towards him, almost impatiently. And we met. His lips softly brushed mine, feather light in their touch. A gasp escaped from me at the contact. And then the foreign feel of his lips on mine collided together. I didn't know what I was doing. Only moving my mouth to fit the shape of his as we both fell into each other. My breathing hitched when he placed his hands on my waist. In an attempt to get closer to him, I wrapped my arms and neck. Using his strength, he raised me up, holding and bearing my weight as I stood on my knees on the bed, almost eye level with him. It felt like fire was consuming me. I wanted to pull away, the burning sensation within my chest hurt so bad. I was greedy and wanting. Who knew a kiss could last so long, much less a first kiss? But there was nothing in this world that had my focus now except his lips, his breath, his low growls and the way his hair felt in my hands. He pulled back and placed a last lingering kiss on my cheek. I looked into his eyes. I'm sure mine seemed dazed, but his seemed focused and consuming. They held wonder and at the same time determination in. Looking down, I pointed to the breathing tube that had been taken off of me. I think I need that. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Alto's eyes paused for a second, before his smile broke through. We stood there, wrapped in each other as we laughed at the memory of the moment. The troubles could wait, just a few seconds more. Let the world consume me after I was done with him. Chapter 28, in which it's decided. In the cold light I live. To love and adore you, it's all that I am. It's all that I have. There will be time. Confidant Alto sat close to me as the others gathered in. Something had changed within the bond. Clear. Like a hazy window that had been cleaned. Now I could see clearly past and view the landscape that was outside. What once were fuzzy thoughts, coming to me with the hazed focus of Alto's mind, now were clear and precise. Alto loved me. It startled me as I felt the flood of emotion come to me after we had kissed and held each other. We had only known each other for only several weeks, but Alto had not been hesitant about the bond. He had accepted it and me since the moment we met. Me, however, I cringed at the wave of patience and yet sadness that seemed to pulse in the back of my mind. I didn't love him. It made me think hard as I recovered in bed, waiting for the effects of the poison to pass. But what was love really? I couldn't come up with an answer, and Alto could not describe my own feelings to me. They were mine alone to interpret. Thought I cared for him, would feel a rip within my soul if he left me. I still did not love him. Love, I realized, did not come as naturally to me. I did not accept the bond as easily as Alto had. I had questioned him. Míos, I still did. I felt weak as I watched his steady black eyes roam the room, but I didn't have the confidence to think that fate could put me in so lucky a situation. I questioned her also, wondering why me, and then I felt loathing. A small dark seed inside of me that hated the fact that I could not have confidence in myself. But, even though I had the assurance of the bond and of Alto's feelings, I still felt in some small way that I was being tricked and lied into something, only to have the rug pulled out from my legs at any moment. I wanted to love Alto, and maybe I did in my own small way. But since both our loves were comparable now to each other, I felt the overwhelming pressure and crushing sensation that I was not enough. Alto's hand reached out and grabbed mine as my thoughts turned darker. Fayette. He reached out and kissed the back of my hand, immediately calming my whirlwind of emotions down. I relaxed within my chair, still clinging to his hand like it was my anchor. Eldon walked in then, leading Lizzie and Jane. This was our small council, our band of trusted people. I was surprised when Alto wanted to gather them, and even more surprised when he said not to include Gavin. Prince August, Jane said, giving a small bow. Lizzie rolled her eyes at the formality but held her tongue. The air around was already set in a serious silence when they had entered. They sat around the table, each finding a chair they were comfortable in. Straight to the point then, Eldon said, "The princess is not safe here." I felt agreement and anger course through Alto. However, was blank, showing to none what his true feelings were. The investigation led to nothing. I've hit a dead end. So has Lizzie and Jane. We can't find any way of knowing how and who poisoned the princess. Lizzie and Jane nodded sadly at the words. What about your end, August? Alto gripped my hand tighter. I've been tracking the different sellers and buyers of Agravain, but no one has shown up yet. Eldon absorbed this information with disappointment. In the meantime, yes, Eldon, Fayette is not safe here. She should stay at the castle, though. I mean, any other place would just bring even more danger, Lizzie said. I felt annoyance at them talking around me as if I wasn't there. What if I wanted to stay and be with Alto? Alto felt my thoughts and shifted to me. No, he said, though the answer was directed at Lizzie. Thea, you are not safe here. Not until we find who did this. But what if I'm more careful? What if I test my food for poison before eating? Avoid people. I can stop it from happening again. Alto shook his head, but Eldon answered, we do not even know if the poison was through consumption. Agravain is special in that it can be used through any form of the body. You can breath it, eat it, drink it, or simply touch it, and you will have been exposed to its effects. My face paled at the thought. It suddenly occurred to me how easy it would be to kill me. Just drop the right amount of poison in my shoes while they are being cleaned. Sprinkle some on my pillows. To my food. Even the air I breathed. And it didn't stop at poison. But if I leave, what if whoever did this follows me? Alto and Eldon look at each other. They already have a plan. Thea, you know you are supposed to go through physical training and go to the academy. I nodded, not wanting to hear what was coming. I have talked to the Queen. She has managed to convince the king that it is within your best interests to go to the academy early and then start the year there. I let go of Alto's hand as the look of hurt crosses his features, one he was not able to hide from the others. You didn't think to ask me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Alto's face went blank again, but I felt the shock clearly within the bond. He didn't think I would protest. He didn't think I would have any complaints if it was in the name of my safety. If I go, I'm taking Lizzie and Jane with me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Real anger coming through me now. I had never been angry at Alto before, but now I was. Now I pushed my emotions through him in the bond and watched as he flinched. Non-royals are not allowed to attend. I'm not a royal. I spat out. Lizzie, Jane and Alden sat in silence as they watched our strange argument. Alto and I shared our thoughts between us, not backing down as we each maintained eye contact. I'm taking them. I practically screamed the words within my mind, over and over again, until I knew Alto had a ringing sensation in his. His eyes looked dazed as he continued staring at me, but no longer focused as I continued to bombard his thoughts with my own. I will not go without them. I will not go to a strange place alone. I will not. IWILLNOT. Alto stood up and growled, a bone-shivering, toe-curling growl that had everyone in the room gasping and scooting away. Enough. Even now, when he was pushed to a place I had never seen him go before, he still did not raise his voice. The menacing soft talk had more effect than if he had yelled at me. A small part of me wished he had, that I would have known it was not serious. He looked at me with eyes glaring down. The beast that he worked so hard to contain was now out, having been pushed and, by my mind, too far. Even if it was his life mate, no one told his inner monster what to do. UWILL go. Think through this and realize that you have to. The academy is more secure than the castle. Far more secure. Lizzie and Jane will go with you on the trip there and when you go back, but they cannot be with you at the academy. I felt tears sting my eyes at his words. Part of me thought I was acting selfish and like a small child, but another part realized the truth within his sentence. However, it was all starting to become too much for me. I had just left my pet several months ago and had to give it up. Now I was comfortable with life here in the castle. I had my routine, and more importantly, I had Alto. But now all this was going to be dragged away, again by the very man I was supposed to stay with. Alto's eyes softened as he registered my thoughts. Fayette, he said my name softly, reaching to stroke my face. I looked up at him as tears blurred my vision. Please don't. I felt his regret at making me cry. I wanted to laugh at the whole situation he was putting me in. I had never asked to be put through all of this. Never asked to be his mate or to have my life constantly bouncing around. He looked down as he read my thoughts. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I realized. He felt he had let me down and in some way was now paying for his actions by having to watch me leave. You will come back. The words were spoken with such confidence that I knew he would claw his way through whatever form of hell he could to have me back. I would, giving me a small smile. I looked around to see that sometime during our argument, everyone had cleared the room. It was now just the two of us. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I leaned into his hand as I inhaled his scent. I don't want to leave you. I spoke with whatever painful truth I could. I don't want to leave you either. We stayed in our own silence. not taking note of the others' thoughts because we were so consumed by our own. What will you do while I'm gone? I had accepted now that there was no getting around that I was going. I needed to stay alive. Alto. Since I am back from my journey, the king has decided that I will stop my royal training. Alto's face remained emotional as he spoke. I realized how lucky I was to have the bond, and see that he felt disgust and loathing at the fact that he had to spend time with his father. You don't like him? I questioned. A vulnerability showed in Alto's eyes, what I never thought him capable of. I do not understand him. Because of that, I am wary of him. I do not like that he disrespected my mother's image by marrying so soon after her death. I nodded, feeling that this was a conversation for another time. We have grown stronger with us together. Now it is time for us to grow when we are apart. I smiled at his poetic words. He only spoke like this to me. Only released his mouth, letting it run free when we were alone. He could talk for hours if he wanted to. I found it odd that he had stayed silent for so long around others. I will try to be strong for you. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, hearts out thanks her unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Alto leaned over and kissed my forehead. He pulled back, resting his forehead on mine as we both looked into each other's eyes. Please try to be strong for you. I am not the sun Fayette. You are. I shuddered in pleasure at his words. Write to me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Hearts out thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. The sudden idea hitting me with excitement. Right. There was amusement within Alto's eyes. I nodded, smiling back at him. I want to save your pretty words on paper. He laughed at my statement, leaning in to capture my lips before I could say more. I will miss you. I'll miss you too. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Hearts out thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I would miss him. I could already feel the absence in my heart. How soon do I leave? Alto sighed before getting up and extending his hand. How do you feel about tomorrow? Boy, you literally just told me today. I said as ASLAPPAHISFACEANSTORAO I don't meet no man. As I got on my horse and rode off into the sunset. Chapter 29, in which it's the king. There wasn't much to pack. Alpha Bruno had sent my stuff to the castle after I first settled in, but all it really consisted of was some clothes, books and a photo album that I kept of my old life. When mother and father were alive and smiling, I considered it my treasure. It all fit within one suitcase. There were other cases, though, clothes that I thought I didn't need, but Alto insisted I had to bring. Dresses of different colors and training gear that I was just starting to learn how to use. Various types of beauty products and other items that Lizzie and Jane ran around grabbing that the Academy list stated I needed in order to learn how to become a proper royal. With the short amount of time Alto had given us, I was amazed at Lizzie and Jane's efforts in managing to get everything. I might have stolen one or two things, Lizzie said. Jane put her hands over her ears. Please don't tell me that. I laughed and watched their interaction with sadness. I would really have to leave them this time. Though a small part of me knew that we would eventually see each other again, I felt a crushing sensation in my chest that made it difficult to breathe. I didn't want to go alone. I scolded myself all night over being a coward. But then, who wouldn't be scared to go to a foreign place without those you loved? I slept with Lizzie and Jane that night. They curled around me in my too large bed, holding me close to them as they whispered words of comfort to me. That it would pass quickly, that I was brave, that they would miss me. All three of us had cried. I felt anger at Alto for making me leave these girls who loved and cared for me, for leaving him. But morning came and the time to leave was upon us. Before we could walk out of my room, though, there was a knock. "Come in," Lizzie said, edging closer to me protectively while Jane crept to a drawer, pulling and tucking into her skirts a small knife. Aman opened the door and stepped in. "The king requests your presence before your departure, Lady Fayette." I took note that he did not call me princess like how everyone else did. Right now. I looked at Lizzie and Jane with worry. If I was being honest, the king was high on my list of who had poisoned me. However, Alto and Eldon argued fervently that it had not been him. All right then. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Jane and I began to step forward, but the man shook his head. They were not requested. I crossed my arms at that. I had enough of Lizzie and Jane being denied. I motioned to Lizzie. "Is my bodyguard. And this is my assistant." I pointed to Jane now. "They will escort me and I refuse to go if they cannot." Conflict showed within the man's eyes, but he finally let out a sigh. "They cannot enter the room with the king, however," he warned us as we walked down the hall. I nodded stiffly. I felt a cold object being pushed into my hand as Jane slyly passed the small knife to me. The man was leading in front of us and noticed nothing. Making sure to not cut myself, I tucked the blade within my pockets, glad that my jacket was long enough to block the slight bulge. We came upon a door that was similar to the Queen's, only instead of the beautiful redwood, this one was dark and almost black. A man guarding the door stepped forward and patted me down. He pulled out the knife and gave me a hard look before taking it. I glanced, exchanging a worried look with Lizzie. I tried to give assurance to myself that the king was never really going to outright attack me. There was no need for the knife. The doors opened then, and I gave one last look to Lizzie and Jane as they stood closely together, their eyes wide and worried. The doors closed behind me, cutting them off from my sight. I turned around and found myself in a study room. Even though it was morning, the fire was already burning brightly within the fireplace. The king stood over it, watching the flames. "Please sit, Fayette." I cautiously came forward and sat down in one of the chairs, the one farthest away from him. He took note of it and smiled at my actions. "I will not bite," laughing at his own joke. I waited for him to continue and get to the point of why I was here. "I have a job for you, Fayette." Turning now to face me, instead of the flames. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." "Yes, you are the inventor of X, Bane, correct?" I nodded slowly. Most had forgotten, with the announcement that I was Alto's life mate, that I had invented X, Bane. "The academy you are going to has a science department there. I want you to do something for me." I stiffened at this. "What?" "I want you to create a counter for the poison Agravane." I grabbed the arms to my chair and sat up. "Why do you want that?" Small panic leaked into my voice as I asked. The king stepped closer to me as I pushed further back into my chair. "I know you would poison Fayette. How?" "Please." At this he rolled his eyes. "I may have a short temper. That fault I will admit too. But stupidity is not one." I continued pressing myself cautiously into the back of the chair, weary of the words he was saying. "There is already an antidote to Agravane. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." "I don't mean an antidote." "You know what I mean." I glanced at the door before setting my eyes back onto the king. "You mean a cure?" He nodded. "Agravane is not a poison you can become immune to. It is something that has always been on my mind, that it can kill werewolves even with our heightened powers." I nodded slowly at his words. They did make sense in a way. I had never heard of Agravane until now, but after being poisoned by it, I delved into researching it and found out all I could upon the subject. Truth be told, I don't know why I had not heard of it sooner. Werewolves feared it. It was one of the deadliest poisons, and one of the few rare ones that, if handled with the proper amount, could actually kill werewolves. Humans had an advantage over us by using it. However, we coexisted peacefully with them. I'll see what I can do. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Admitting to my interest in the project, the king shook his head. This is an order by your king. I will not let you pass the academy and come home until you have fulfilled my requests. I stared, shocked and blank-faced at him. Request. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Questioning the word yes. There is another task I am setting aside for you to do. I felt panic rise up in my chest. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. More for me to do. I already felt an enormous pressure set on me now with the challenge that I could not come back until I had found a cure for a poison that no one had been able to find yet. To find a literal immunity to it. I don't think I will be able to finish the things. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Voicing my doubt out loud. The king's eyes flashed in a way that reminded me of Alto. How he held authority with such ease, expecting people to listen and follow. You created X, Bane. It seemed that these words were his solution. That I had created an impossible before, so I could do it now again. What the king didn't take into account was that I was desperate. I was a frightened girl who wanted her father back and would do anything in the world to accomplish it. But the threat of not seeing Alto until I had done it could prove to be as big of an incentive. Fine. Bewildered that the king had come to me for this, what is your other demand? For it was a demand. I knew that even though he phrased it as a request, I had no choice in the matter. There are things that go on within this kingdom, actually within the world, that you, Alto and many others are blissfully unaware of. I looked in confusion as he continued. I'll admit that I did not want you at first. I still hold grudging feelings about you. You are a weakness, Ray. Do I think that August will be a good ruler? No, not really. My eyes widened at this father's admission of his son. He looked down at me and grinned at my shocked expression before continuing in his rambled speech. August acts without consult. August thinks his overbearing power will make people listen to him. August commands in a way that drives fear into others' hearts and makes men go home and tell their wives a plan of action in case they do not arrive again the next day. August is not a fit ruler. I felt anger course through me that the king would say this about his son. But also anger that there was some small truth to it. August was some of these things. He softened up around me, but with others, he was all the king described him to be. You just don't want to give up your rule, I said hotly. The king raised an eyebrow at me. Is that so wrong? That I don't want to give up my kingdom and power to a boy? It's as if you were to one day go to your alpha and tell him he had to leave, that this was no longer his pack. I shivered at the comparison. I had never thought of it like that. I didn't want to hear the king's side to the story. I wanted to be on Alto's side. I wanted to support Alto, but both sides made sense and were right and wrong in their own way. I cannot stop law. Traditionally, Alto would not take over until I passed. But law states that because he has found his life mate, he has to rule. A brief thought flashed through my mind if maybe Alto's long search for his life mate had not been as romantic as the media and court gossip made it to be. I've gone off topic though, the king said, walking back to stare at his fire. As I was saying, there are things that go on without your knowledge. There is a drug that is currently being spread. Many do not know of it. I have been fighting it in the system it's under for years now, but I think you can be my solution. I waited, knowing the long-winded out's finally coming. This drug has the capability of making humans into werewolves. My eyes widened at the news. I had never heard of this before. Humans are using it against us. They are transforming into hybrids that are monsters. Sometimes they manage to capture werewolves themselves and use the drug to turn them into even more grotesque creatures. Creatures with too much power. What do you want me to do? Create a drug that will negate its effects. I want a drug that will make the humans go back to their original state. One that will make the drug's effect null. With these words he pulled out a golden necklace with a circled charm. Inside this charm is the drug. This is the only safe way I can think of transporting it to you and of you carrying it. He walked closer to me and I stiffened as he pulled the chain over my head. I looked closely at the necklace. It was plain and had no special design or inscription other than the king's royal crest. August will think it suspicious that I called you, so just say I wanted to give you that. He points to the charm. I noticed the top and saw, upon closer inspection, that it looked like it could open if twisted. Use the amount carefully. It was hard to obtain this. I looked up at the king then. Why should I trust you? How do I know that this is really what you say it is? Though I know, I could be making a poison like no other for you. The king threw his head back and laughed. You could. I guess you will have to trust me. He gave me a feral grin, letting his eyes glow and fangs slide out. I shivered at the sight. Don't test me, Fayette. Everything I do is for this kingdom. I glared at him. Don't forget now. The cure for aggravain and a drug to null the effects of this one. He points to my new necklace. I still don't trust you. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Hearts out thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. And I still don't like you. He threw back. I hate the thought that I could kill my son right now just by killing you. It could even be an accident. Maybe you fall down the stairs. But if you fall, you bring him down with you. He glared back at me as we both stared into each other's eyes, loathing and hatred filling them. A queen is supposed to protect her tongue. I clenched my fists at that. He didn't like anyone. He didn't like his own son. He didn't like me. I was sure now that he didn't even like his current queen. Do you? I hesitated at the question, that something nagged within my brain to ask. Do you know who poisoned me? The king stared at the flames, his fascination for them making me uncomfortable. I have my suspicions. I stood then and took a brave but tentative step towards him. Tell me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Hearts out thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He shook his head. No, Fayette. This is deeper than you will ever realize. Who can you trust? Who is really good? Who is really bad? I have learned that you only can really trust yourself. You should remember that also. I bristled at the comment, not happy with the answer. What makes you think I'm not going to tell Alto every year? You can't. His answer came out so simply. Why, I narrowed my eyes in suspicion now. Even through the life mate's bonds, I am still your king and my command is higher within your mind. Your wolf, no matter how buried inside you she is, will not allow you to disobey me. Keep this from August. Do not tell anyone of your mission. There are a lot of lives resting upon you now, Fayette. I hope you take that seriously. I stood there, mouth gaping and not knowing what to say. The king suddenly turned then and walked towards the door. Don't worry about eavesdroppers either. The room is soundproof from werewolf hearing, so my son and your two little friends were not able to hear our conversation. Before I could ask what he meant, he had swung the doors open to reveal a furious Alto. I choked at the dark air that swirled around him, an angry expression within his eyes. What did you do to her? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfading patience, enthusiasm. Walking slowly up to his father. For all his big top, I could still see the obvious fear in the king's eyes. He knew his son could overwhelm him. I was just wishing her luck at the academy and giving her a parting gift. Alto's eyes owning on the necklace that I was now wearing. Take it off. His voice calm yet the coldness within it making me shiver. He reached as if to grab it from me, but I stepped back. No. Surprise cracked through me from the bond. He had not thought I would defy him. I like it. I waited for the angry beast within Alto to lash out, but to my surprise he reined it within. Instead he cast one last glare at the king before grabbing my hand and dragging me out. I turned just in time to see the smile on the king's lips as he waved goodbye. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the story, please give it a like. And don't forget to subscribe to get notifications for updates.